Hello and welcome back to the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, and welcome back to the TBM 930 World Tour. Today you find me on the uninhabited island of Attu, which is pretty much the furthest point east in the United States. It's at the very end of the chain of islands known as the Aleutian Islands, which we travelled down through in the last episode of the TBM 930 World Tour. Today we are headed towards Japan. Our first stop is going to be Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky in Russia. Then we're going to go down to Sapporo, our first stop in Japan, before heading down to Tokyo, the Japanese capital. Attu Island was the site of the only World War II land battle fought in the United States, and the battlefield area is now a US National Historic Landmark. The airport that we're taking off from today will serve us just fine to take off for Petropavlovsk in a few moments' time, but it's actually now closed. It was a former Coast Guard station, but it was closed in August 2010, at which point this remote island became entirely uninhabited. So let's check the route map and get underway. Single-engine turboprop like the TBM 930, this episode has some pretty ambitious long flights. First we're flying from Attu over to Petropavlovsk in Russia, then down to Sapporo in Japan, and we'll wrap up this episode flying into the Japanese capital of Tokyo. So let's get underway then to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, just the shortest of pushbacks here at Attu Island, and I'm not even sure, to be honest, if we need to push back. As I said in the last episode, this must be the loneliest place to work as ground crew at an airport. But it's quite touching that Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 has placed these virtual airport workers for us, and I may as well use them as they're here. So, pretty light winds here at Attu Island. I can't actually get any real-world weather data because it's so remote. It doesn't appear on Flight Radar 24, but you can just see the windsock over here is blowing slightly to the right of where we are now. That actually means it's going to be a crosswind from our right-hand side as we take off. What we're just going to do is taxi out here, do a U-turn on the runway, and then take off. But I am quite heavy. I need a fair amount of fuel to do this flight. So, out of abundance of caution, I am going to go all the way to the end of the runway, so I've got the full length available. But that won't take too long. We're taking off on runway 20, and that broadly takes us in a southerly direction, and then we're going to be heading to the right and taking off and climbing out towards Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky in Russia. So not a long taxi at all. Here we are. Of the various remote airports that we have visited on the TBM 930 World Tour, I think this is probably the most remote. So as I say, their windsock just over on the left-hand side, blowing gently to the left. That suggests we have a very light crosswind from our right-hand side. So I'll apply a little bit of right pressure on the rudder. Sorry, left pressure on the rudder as we take off. Feel that wind actually, it's a little bit gusty. And we are, as always, looking for a rotate speed of 90 knots. There it is, and away we go. Yeah, again, just the wind making its presence felt as we climb out there. So positive rate gear can go up. I'm not going into an aggressive climb here because we are quite heavily loaded with fuel. If you just look in the centre screen here, you can see the fuel quantity gauges. Got about 70% full, which is quite heavy. I'm now going to start transitioning to a flight level change climb of 140 knots. Just find that 140 knots gives us a decent rate of climb in the TBM. Over 150 knots, I'm going to bring in the flaps. Just engage the autopilot. Just in heading mode for the time being. We've got just this peninsula over on our right hand side that won't be able to clear. Beautiful dawn sunlight over on our left hand side here. Nice calm seas out in the Pacific. And now that we're clear of that little bit of headland, what I'm going to do is turn to the west, so go to the right, and we're going to look to intercept our route. Incredibly beautiful, incredibly remote, well worth visiting. This has been quite a memorable way to cross the Pacific. Coming down the Aleutian Islands in many respects has made quite light work of the Pacific Ocean. Do check out the last episode of the TBM 930 World Tour to see our journey through the Aleutian Islands. But on this episode we are essentially going to complete our Pacific crossing and gradually make our way to Tokyo by the end of this episode, so that's quite exciting. That's quite a lot of flying and quite a lot of time involved to cover that distance. But you don't have to watch that, of course. What I'm going to do now is time-lapse the cruise, and I will speak to you when we are on our approach into Kamchatsky in a few hours' time. So welcome back to the flight. We are just coming up on 10,000 feet. I'm actually going to keep the descent going here. We'll carry on down to 5,000, see how we get on. And we are just a few miles away now from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. So let's just take a quick look at the Navigraph chart. We are flying the SIPFA 5 Papa approach. This takes us into the Kalaktyaka NDB, which we are fast approaching here. What I'm then going to do from that NDB is fly the ILS Zulu approach into the airport. So I'm going to come down to the NDB around here, then fly a heading of 254 degrees, and then intercept the instrument landing system into 34 left. I've never flown into this airport before, so I'm only too happy to rely on an instrument landing system since it's available. Let's just keep that descent going. I actually think I might need to... Well, I'll have to see how I get on. It feels like I'm descending a little bit steeply. I'm still at 8,000 feet at the moment. And the airport elevation is only 128 feet above sea level. So it feels like I might be coming in a little bit steep at the moment. But let's see how we get on. Again, part of the adventure in the TBM 930 World Tour is always that I have not done this. I've not rehearsed this. I'm flying into this airport for the first time. I'm doing this entirely by the seat of my pants, as it were. So it's starting to see something here now. Only slightly less remote really than Attu Island, I suspect. And what I'm just going to do is now switch over to heading hold mode and fly on that bearing of 254 degrees. And down here on the primary flight display I'm going to switch over so I can pick up the localizer, that green bar just here is showing the localizer. When the green bar at the top just here comes down to the centre where the arrow is, that will show that I am aligned with the runway centre line. So really keeping that descent going nice and steeply, because here is the glide slope, this diamond. I want that to be in the middle there. When it is, I'm nicely on the glide slope. So I would actually prefer to go below the glide slope and then meet it from underneath, if you see what I mean, as I make my way into the airport. But I think we can start to see Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky just down here. The airport is just a little bit to the northwest of the city. It's a little bit hazy. I can't see anything over there at the moment. But it does look pretty beautiful, I have to say. A few snowy topped mountains just over there in the distance. So I'm going to now turn to an intercept heading for the localizer. I'll just turn right by about 30 odd degrees, just so we're on an intercept course. Again, because this is all unrehearsed, I'm looking at this myself for the first time, just curiosity getting the better of me here as I look out the window. When I really need to be focusing on this landing, I've got a bank of cloud just in front of me. Visibility isn't that great, and I need to find my way to the airport safely. Just going to engage approach hold. I do sometimes find the approach hold on the TBM is a little bit unreliable. Let's see if it works this time. What should happen in engaging approach hold is, as that runway centre line comes across into the centre, again that top green line, as it comes in to meet the arrow, what should happen is that the autopilot picks that up and turns us straight towards the runway. keep the speed up a little bit. Here comes the centre line. Is the autopilot going to pick it up? No, it's not. So I'm going to disengage the autopilot at this point. Sounds like we have someone at the door. So the barking continues, but I'm still managing to concentrate on my flying. If you've watched other videos that I've put on the channel, you will have heard that from time to time I get joined in the cockpit by one of the two dogs in the house, and sometimes they make their presence known audibly as well. So yeah, very glad I've got the ILS here actually, because I really can't see much. It's quite murky over here, so I'm just following the localizer in. I am flying this manually. The heading is 344 degrees, but I have got a pretty hefty crosswind coming from the left hand side. If you just look down here on the display, you can see that arrow coming from the left to the right saying 22, 23 knots. So that's the wind indicator. It's blowing from my left hand side, gusting at around about 20 knots, which is pretty forceful. So I am actually flying slightly sideways, or crabbing, as the flying expression goes. But I am now just going to level off whilst I try and get a visual on the runway. I've kind of dropped out of the cloud here. But really feeling the winds now. So the glide slope I'm now starting to come up on. You can see this diamond dropping, that is the glide slope. So we'll pick up that descent gradient. Still can't see the runway. And I am being blown off course by this crosswind. I think it's time to really start slowing up actually. Let's get the wheels out. Wind still gusting at around 15 knots. Starting to drop back a bit now. Now about 7 or 8 knots. That's a bit better. But I still do not have the runway in sight. Not very far at all now until we're going to be landing. I am flying this entirely on instruments. Outer marker beacon for the airport just there, which we can hear beeping away. So I know I'm getting close. I think I'm starting to see something in front of me which looks like a runway actually, which is good. Yeah, okay, so I can now see the runway. Just doing a quick check there for ice. We are okay. It's still 6 degrees outside, but just wanted to check since we've come through a lot of cloud. Here's an interesting question.
500.
There appear to be two runways. Are we on the right one? I think we are, because the runway on the approach chart I'm looking at is 34 left, so I assume the other runway that we're looking at is 34 right. But I don't want to do a Harrison Ford and go and land this thing on the taxiway. Okay, well this is interesting because that is a taxiway, so let's just climb back up a little bit, and I'm going to do a quick circuit, very, very quick, and take it into the runway on the right hand side. The localizer seemed to be a little bit misleading there actually. Obviously it is very, very quiet in the skies around Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, so I'm not going to be too concerned about upsetting any other fellow VATSimmers. And I don't really want to lose visual reference of the runway there, given the haze that we're flying through. What I'm just going to do is fly a mile or so this way, and then I'll turn back, and I will know to land on the right hand side. That is a first. I've not had that happen. So the charts say 3-4 left, but the question is that actually 3-4 left or 3-4 right? We will find out shortly once we're over the numbers, I expect. So there is the runway. We'll try again, this time going for that right-hand strip.
500.
Just drop the speed right back now to our VREF of 85 knots. The wind helpfully has dropped right back now. So it looks like this runway just says 3-4. No left or right. And there we are. So I'm going to do a quick U-turn and taxi in. Something almost constituting a bit of drama there on on the final approach. But again, the nimble handling of the TBM 930 made that pretty straightforward. So, welcome to Russia. We will go and take a look at Petropavlovsk very, very shortly with the drone, just after I have parked up and shut the plane down. But it seems quite remarkable to think that I am no longer in the Americas. I've spent the vast majority of the TBM 930 World Tour thus far flying through North and South America. Right, this spot looks as good as any, so I will shut the plane down here and let's get the drone out and go and explore Petropavlovsk. So Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky is a city on the Pacific coast of Russia. It has a population of around about 180,000 people, and it's the administrative, industrial, scientific and cultural centre of Kamchatka Krai, which is this region of Russia. The city is widely known as just Petropavlovsk, meaning the city of Peter and Paul, and the adjective Kamchatsky was added to the official name around about a century ago. Just on the far right hand side of the picture here and in sight of the city is the Aleutian volcano, which is an active stratovolcano in Russia which last erupted back in 2008. Aleutian lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where the Pacific plate is sliding underneath the Eurasian plate, so the city is no stranger to occasional eruptions and earthquakes. Okay, so we're just heading out towards runway 34 right, and we're going to be taking off to the north and then turning to the west as we continue our journey on down to Japan, with our next stop being Sapporo. So this is quite possibly going to be the longest flight I've yet done in the TBM 930 World Tour. So I've got plenty of fuel, and therefore I'm going to need plenty of runway to take off because the plane is quite heavy. Picking up speed nicely though, which is good. There's 90 knots, and away we go. Just gave it a little bit of extra speed on that takeoff. And gear can go up. We're over 150 knots, so I'm going to bring in the flaps to 0. And we've got some murky clouds up front there, which we will have to navigate our way through. So farewell to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Ahead of us we have around about a 3.5 to 4 hour flight down to Japan. I'm now going to time-lapse the flight, and I will speak to you when we are on our approach. So welcome back to the flights and welcome to Japan. It really feels quite remarkable to say that. We have travelled a long way to get here. It seems crazy to think that just at the start of the last episode of the TBM 930 World Tour, I started out back in Alaska. That feels like a long way back now. Now we really are in a different part of the world. We're the other side of the Pacific for sure now. And this is our first encounter with Japan. We're flying into Sapporo. It's a small airport. Obviously more than big enough for the TBM. I'm just going to show you a quick map of the airport. Here we are. Single runway. We're going to be landing on runway 32 here. And the approach that we're doing is the RNAV approach. So we're currently flying to waypoint Jode, then Palsy, then Adpin, and then we're going to be flying into runway 32. So we need to be at 1,800 feet by Jode, 1,500 feet by Adpin, 1,100 feet by Ikanu, 622 feet by CO252, and we're looking at a minimum descent altitude of 460 feet. The elevation of the runway is 27 feet above sea level. So all of that I have plugged in down here on the flight plan. You can see here all the various altitudes that I've popped in to reflect what is on the chart, and that will give us some decent guidance down to the runway. You can just start to see the city here. We really aren't far out at all. In fact, if I just quickly transition back to the chart, you can see we are this pink arrow just here, making our way into Jode. So I can't see the airport just yet, but we will no doubt see it very, very soon. And the weather here is a lot better than it was back in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. It's a lot nicer. We had some pretty heavy clouds that we had to work our way around on the way out, but it's a lot brighter down here. So just keeping an eye out now to see the airport, which should appear on our right hand side very, very shortly. So we have the landing lights on, we're below 10,000 feet. We are approaching our target altitude of 3,000. I'm actually just going to reduce that down a bit further because we want to be at 15,000 feet by the point we get to turn on to finals at Adpin, which is coming up quite soon. Just see it just there on the map. There's Adpin. We need to be at 1,500 feet by the time we get there, so I'm just making sure we continue that descent at a decent rate. But having put all the RNAV data into the computer here, in practice I'm probably just going to end up doing this largely visually, I think. It's nice and clear, so I'm not too worried. Slightly different to our flight into Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky on the last one, where we landed in quite a thick haze. I have flown to Japan a few times on Flight Sim, more on Prepare 3D V5 doing my airliner flying, but it's been quite a while and I've never flown to Sapporo. So this is entirely new, and just as we had with Petropavlovsk, this is entirely unrehearsed. This is the first time I'm doing this. However, it looks relatively straightforward. So, I'm hoping for no great drama here. I think I might just be able to see the runway over there. Maybe? Just over there, look. Just there. You can just see some flashing lights. Okay, so got a visual on the runway, which is good. Just keep that descent going. And just to be 100% clear on where we are, we've now come down from Jode to Palsy to Adpin, and now we are on our final approach course into the runway. So not far to go now at all. We've got a pretty strong headwind at the moment. If you just look down here, you can see this arrow pointing directly towards me at 22 knots. And actually that sounds about right. If we take a quick look at flight radar 24, you can see the weather for Sapporo, 330 degrees at 14 knots is the wind. So that is pretty accurate. We've had pretty strong headwinds all the way here. It's been really quite challenging. It's taken, I was expecting a flight time around about 4 hours. It's actually taken more like 4 hours and 40 minutes to get down to Japan. And we have exhausted almost all of our fuel. We've exhausted about 80% of our fuel load. So it's a good job that we're going to be landing shortly. So I'm going to turn off the autopilot at this stage, turn off the yaw damp and the flight directors, and I now have control. And just going to really slow up the plane at this stage, get the landing gear down. And put the flaps out. And the second stage of flaps. And I can now see that we're nicely on the PAPI lights, 2 red, 2 white, at the right hand side there of the runway. That wind's just dropping back nicely. It's a little bit gusty, I have to say. And in the latest update for Flight Sim 2020, they have improved the weather a lot. The gusts feel just a lot more authentic, I have to say. So yeah, it's windy. Thankfully just a headwind. But I'm just having to trim the plane down a bit here actually, because it's that wind is trying to lift us as we go. It's interesting, our ground speed is now just 75 knots. Our indicated airspeed is about 90 knots. So we're going over the ground a lot slower than we're going through the air, which is why this feels like it's taking a while. Oh, and again, a bit of a gust there. This is looking alright. I'm now just going to pull right back on the power. Just hold up the nose a bit. And there we are, that's nice and smooth. So you can see the strength of that wind there on that windsock. Now, also the TBM's pretty small. That's the wrong screen. Let's try this one instead. TBM's pretty small, but you can see we're just making our way up here to this taxiway, and we will then pull off and go and find somewhere to park. Here we are. Let's turn off the landing lights, and can turn off the strobes as well. Bring in the flaps. And we can pull up right here and go and explore the city with the drone. Okay, let's turn off the engine. And head outside. Sapporo is the largest city north of Tokyo, and it's the largest city on Hokkaido, which is the northernmost main island of Japan, and it ranks as the 5th most populous city in the country. In doing a bit of research on Sapporo, it seems like it has a very prestigious sporting history. So Sapporo hosted the 1972 Winter Olympics, the first Winter Olympics ever held in Asia, and the second Olympic Games held in Japan after the 1964 Summer Olympics. Sapporo is currently bidding also for the 2030 Winter Olympics, and it hosted 3 games during the 2002 FIFA World Cup. Today, of course, we'll be flying down to Tokyo, but Japan is famous, of course, for its bullet train, and you could get from Sapporo down to Tokyo in around about 8 hours by rail. So let's head off to Tokyo. I thought I'd just do something a little bit different and take off a little bit before dawn and head down so that we will hopefully see Tokyo in the lovely bright morning light. I haven't done much night flying on the TBM 930 World Tour, very little actually. We left Santiago in Chile in the dark, as I recall. Otherwise, hardly any night flying. But I thought this might be quite a good way to see Tokyo, and also, being as I'm always such a stickler for realism, it is this is the real world time in Tokyo right now, so it's quite late at night here in the UK, and it's very early in the morning in Tokyo. So let's just make sure I've got all the lights on, so switch the strobes on. And yeah, we can see those flashing nicely over there. And got the flap set, so we're all good to go. Let's push the throttle forward. A little bit of pressure on the stick. And away we go. So the gear can go up. That wind is still pretty strong actually. Decent headwind. And we have a little under 500 miles to fly down to Tokyo, so a fraction of the distance really, about half the distance we've just flown down from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. So I'll take in the flaps now. Engage the autopilot. We're going to set ourselves up on a nice, flight level change climb. I'll set it to 140 knots. And there we are. There is Sapporo by night. So the morning light should have broken by the time we get down to Tokyo in a couple of hours' time, and you may also be able to enjoy the sunrise, all being well, as I time-lapse the cruise for our flight down to the Japanese capital. I will speak to you on our approach in a few moments' time. So welcome back to the flight. You join us now in the outskirts of Tokyo. We're at 8,000 feet. In fact, I'm just starting to descend a little bit further down. Taking ourselves down to 5,000 feet now. And Tokyo is all around us here. We're going to be flying into Tokyo Haneda International Airport, which is the major international airport. Well, there's two major international airports serving Tokyo. One is Tokyo Narita, one is Tokyo Haneda. And we're going to go into Haneda, and it's closest to downtown Tokyo. Just show you a quick summary of where we are. So this is our route down from Sapporo, and you can now see that we're just right in the thick of Tokyo here. The airport is just in front of us and over to the right hand side, and what I have done is an abbreviated version of this approach plate, the Godin 1 Hotel. I've basically taken a shortcut because taking a look at Simmerware, the skies here are really quiet. Okay, so no one else is flying online right now, so it's okay to take a shortcut. But that's the route that we've taken down from Sapporo, just there. So let's just jump back into the sim and see what we can see of the airport. I think, in fact, the airport is just down there. Yep, that's definitely the airport, just over there. It's quite unusual, really, for me to fly into a major international airport like Haneda. And this is a biggie. Let's take a quick look at a map just to give you a sense of the scale of this airport. This is what it looks like. We're going to be flying into runway 34 right, and we're just going to park off to the left-hand side once we've landed. Of course, in real life, I don't think you'd take a TBM 930 into Tokyo Haneda. It would all be major airlines, but we're going to suspend reality on this occasion and take the TBM in since it's nice and close to downtown Tokyo, which is where we want to be. It's been quite a while now, actually, since we were in a capital city on the TBM 930 World Tour. I think, off the top of my head, the last time we were in a capital city was Mexico City, right the way over the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, I'm just going to shortcut this a little bit here, because we are getting close and we really don't need to worry about other air traffic at the moment. It's very early in the morning here. We had obviously a lovely sunrise out the left-hand side of the plane. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that looks on time-lapse. What I'm just now going to do is switch over to my ILS display on my primary flight display just in front of me here. What I'm now just doing by degrees is intercepting the localizer, which is the centerline of the runway. Just keep that descent going. Starting to slow the plane up a bit now, just doing 180 knots, but with the airport just over here on the right hand side, we will need to keep that descent going quite sharply, actually. So I'm now actually going to turn off the autopilot and the yaw damper and the flight directors and just carry on flying this manually. Goodness me! Okay, seem to get caught in a slight gust of wind there. We can now see the runway right in front of us. There we are. Yeah, there's some interesting winds here, by all accounts. So really pulling back on the speed now. Not quite sure what that is just down there. Is that a fountain? Looks like it might be. Or some kind of other feature. Who knows? We'll have to take a look at that when we get the drone out. Fascinating. Okay, let's get the landing gear out now. Quite a contrast to be landing at the end of this episode into Tokyo Haneda, having started off this episode up in Attu Island. Talk about one extreme to the other. So we're going to fly over a runway which is just in front of us. You might just be able to see. It's kind of slightly perpendicular to the direction we're flying in. I think that's runway 25. And then there's two massive bridges which take the aircraft back to the main bit of the airport. Very excited to see what the Tokyo scenery has to offer. This is my first visit to Tokyo on Flight Sim 2020. this also makes me feel excited for when we've got some study level long haulers for Flight Sim 2020. It can't be that much longer now to wait. We've got some of the short haulers. I've got the Airbus A320 and the Boeing 737 now. It would be great to get some study level add-ons for Flight Sim 2020 which can do long hauls. It would be great to fly all the way out here from London or something like that. Bit of a float maybe. But we've got tons of runway to use here, so it really doesn't matter. Oh, very nice, very smooth. So we have touched down in Tokyo. My lockdown project of the TBM 930 World Tour continues. Having started all the way back in Cambridge in the UK, having done all of North America and South America, having now crossed the Pacific through the Aleutian Islands, we are now in Asia. I know this is just a simulation, but I can't help but feel a real sense of accomplishment in having got this far. So I'm just going to bring in the flaps. And there is no GA parking area here at Tokyo Haneda. This really is the domain of big airliners. But we can just find somewhere nearby to park up. And we will park up right here. At the beginning of the next episode, we will take a look at Tokyo itself before continuing our journey around the Pacific Rim. If you've enjoyed watching this episode, please do click on the like button and please do hit subscribe, and I will be back doing more flying both on the TBM 930 World Tour and also short and long haul flying on both Repair 3D V5 and on MSFS 2020. Speak to you very soon. Thanks for watching.